Please note that any explanation of the psilocybin experience will never justify the real thing, and I also do not condone the use of any psychedelic substance. This video is purely for entertainment and educational purposes only. I will do my best to portray the psilocybin experience based on different dosages, which does make a dramatic difference, as well as describing the unique characteristics of the psilocybin experience compared to other psychedelics. All descriptions in this video is a combination of common trip reports as well as my own subjective experiences. Psilocybin has a lot of unique traits, just like any other psychedelic substance. Some of these characteristics may overlay with other psychedelic experiences, but the following traits are pretty consistent and common when we're talking about psilocybin mushrooms. It's a complete entheogen. It's the oldest entheogen known to man, cosmic and alien, especially in high doses, playful and childlike nature in small to moderate doses, can be malevolent and extremely dark in very high doses. Emotional roller coaster and harder to control, especially when you compare it to LSD. Confusion and thought loops can be very common. Psilocybin also takes longer to integrate when compared to other psychedelics. Physical effects of psilocybin may include, but are not limited to, heavy body load, tactile enhancement, runny nose, olfactory hallucinations, excessive yawning, eye watering, and body temperature fluctuation. Beginning phases. During the come up, it's very common to experience bright, saturated colors, increased senses like crisper sounds, increased visual acuity, and increased empathy, high awareness. You may also feel anxiety and or nausea during the come up, but don't worry, this does pass. So this is the part that most of you came for. How does this psilocybin experience actually feel like on a subjective level? I will separate this into 4 parts: low dose, medium dose, high dose, and monstrous dose. Please note that psilocybin potency vary greatly depending on the batch of mushrooms. Low dose, 0.5 to 2 grams. The analogy I like to use is that this is like dipping your toes into water. Visually, things start to move and breathe, especially when you start to focus on a single point over an extended period of time. It's very common to experience peripheral visual drifting. Visual acuity increases. You may notice that the resolution of textures may significantly increase, like when you look at stones on the pavement or grass. You may also experience changing color spots as well as basic patterns, closed eye visuals. Sounds start to become wider and more in depth, so this will naturally lead to an increased appreciation of music. Cognitively, thought patterns begin to change and become more fluid. And this is because psilocybin makes our brain more hyper-connected, which allows us access to older structures of the brain. This may result in old memories and insights to come up, like old childhood memories or even dreams and stuff like that. You may also feel like you're in a very light dreaming state. The veil of separation begins to slightly dissolve, so you may feel more connectedness with yourself and others. This will also result in a significant increase in empathy and creativity, as well as your emotions being amplified. So if you're feeling happy, you're going to feel really happy. If you're feeling sad, you're going to feel really sad. I've noticed in these low doses, things start to have a bit more life and color to it, almost like the universe gives you like these HD goggles. Nature is especially awe-inspiring. It's almost like looking at the world through the eyes of a child, where everything is so amazing and beautiful. This is more of a fun recreational dose. You also may feel like deja vu, like you've been there before, which can be a very weird feeling. It really is like rediscovering the world and connecting with your inner child. From my experiences with these low doses, I remember always like giggling like a little kid and being amazed with everything and having this bliss and joy just radiate throughout my body. And it gives me the opportunity to really reconnect myself with nature and life itself. With a low dose, you can still go out, explore, talk to people, and be reasonably functional. Most people aren't going to freak out if they see a stranger on this kind of dose. And even though you can still talk properly and do many activities that you can do sober, just don't be a silly cunt and drive a vehicle or operate heavy machinery or anything like that, because you're still not 100% there, you know what I mean? Moderate, 2 to 4 grams. This dose would be more like snorkeling, right? Where you can look under the water as you please, but you can also kind of take a breather when you want to, so there's still that level of control. This dose is when things go up a notch and when things start to become a little bit more life-changing in terms of how you perceive yourself and reality. Things start to distort more intensely, and you may see projections of your subconscious mind merging into your external environment. This is when it starts to get more into like this lucid dreaming territory. Information, memories, and ideas start to flow in at a much faster rate. So you might find yourself connecting more dots and swimming around in your own psyche. Visually, you get very obvious open-eye visuals like progressive warping, direct visual drifting, color shifting, and may also see ancient cultural patterns. It's common to feel a heavy body load and weird bodily sensations. Like I personally get like this clammy coldness followed by this feverish heat. This is what the Tibetans called water sinking into fire. Ego starts to diminish, so much so that you may start to experience ego dissolution, which usually leads to existential questions about reality. You also start to lose sense of time, usually slows down. Higher awareness of self, which is useful for objective analysis. You can also get very high sensitivity to emotions. In the low to medium dose, mushrooms can be very playful by nature, so it can be a joyful experience just swimming around and exploring your unconscious mind. However, because you're more susceptible mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, it is highly recommended that you get a trip sitter and have 0 interruptions. Body load can get significantly heavy, so it may be difficult to walk. Also, eye-watering and runny nose can be more intense, as well as olfactory hallucinations. When I'm on shrooms, my skin has this very weird, bizarre scent to it that is just indescribable. Very similar to ayahuasca actually, which is interesting to note. Personally, my body temperature always goes up and down as well. And what I've noticed that in this dose range, it makes it very easy for you to step outside yourself and really objectively analyze yourself. And because of this, moderate doses are commonly found to be very therapeutic in terms of letting go of past traumas and anxiety. 4 to 6 grams. So this is like scuba diving and the surface of the water gets sealed shut and there's just no turning back. This is commonly known to be the heroic dose or even the talk to God dose. This is more of a lie down, close your eyes and just shut the fuck up and listen dose. Be warned though, this dose should only be reserved for the courageous, trained psychonaut who really wants to go to that next level. This is when you get very strong hallucinations like fractals, sacred geometry and very intricate patterns. It is very common to envision symbols portrayed from ancient cultures such as the Aztecs, Mayans, Hindu, African, Native American, Aboriginal and Egyptian. High doses of mushrooms can also induce feelings of transcendent and out-of-body experiences. You also get more access to the primitive part of your brain, so you might feel like this primal type beast creature coming out from the depth of your own psyche. You may also experience trembling or shaking beginning in the pelvic region, spreading up through your torso. These physical sensations should not be recognized as symptoms of illness, but signs of transcendence, so don't resist the experience and just let it out, man. On this level dose, it gets increasingly harder to walk. You can also get feelings of unity and interconnectedness. The speed of universal downloads go up a notch, so you may feel like this intense defragmentation going on. It's normal to feel these distinct sentient beings contacting you using this non-language form of communication, but you can somehow understand. It's like so fucking mind-blowing. 100% ego death is possible on this dose, but very unlikely, as most will never reach this state using this dose alone. When you go up to the high doses, I've noticed that mushrooms no longer have like this playful childlike nature to it when you're looking at the low to medium dose. This is when mushrooms start to become a little bit more unforgiving. They can be very merciless in showing you how much of an asshole you really are and pointing out all the negative personality traits that you need to work on. And at least with me anyway, and I remember getting like this very strong sense of these indigenous tribe spirits energetically communicating with me, but they weren't using English, but I could completely understand what they were communicating with me. And it's usually a similar core message of like, get off your fucking ass and do something, this world is in a state of emergency kind of thing. Higher doses will definitely cause more intense catharsis. I find myself purging in various different ways, from crying to yawning to burping to, I've never thrown up, but some people do, even screaming. And all of this can be very healing because you're energetically releasing all this blocked energy or trauma, you know, whatever you want to label it as. Thought loops and confusion is very common on this dose, and it's also very hard to speak properly. Like I personally struggle just to string a sentence together. But yeah, high doses are very intense and definitely not for the light-hearted. Watch this, 7+ grams. This This is like going to the bottom of the ocean, finding a wormhole and getting transported into a different dimension in an alien alternate universe. I know I'm exaggerating, but seriously, when you go to these really high doses, it gets very alien, very cosmic, and it's just not from here. After my 7.5 gram dose, which is actually equivalent to 10 plus grams of psilocybin cubensis, I was 100% convinced that mushrooms are not from this planet, and they are unlike any psychedelic substance I've ever experienced. When you go more to the monstrous or barbaric doses, this is when your nervous system is completely liberated from all human conceptual constructs. In other words, all your conditioned belief systems about yourself and reality just gets obliterated. Extremely intense hallucinations, blinded visuals, fractals, things morphing and splicing into each other, and other powerful, ineffable visions. Some describe it as a prolonged DMT trip, which I would definitely agree with. Ego death is much more likely, and if not, then you're going to get very overwhelming feelings like you're in the process of a physical and metaphysical death. And psilocybin is very infamous of convincing you that you're going to die. Distinctions between the internal world and the external world completely disappears. You really start to go into uncharted territories and may even transport to alien dimensions and go into contact with strange entities. Terence McKenna describes self-transforming machine hours, but I don't know, like most people will never see this, and I think this is all depends on your own belief systems. This can induce extremely intense catharsis, like the most intense catharsis I've ever experienced in my life, but this can be very useful in, letting go of blocked energies you may have. Consciousness is pretty much free from the constraints of your own ego, so the sky's the limit of where you can go with this. Your consciousness can travel to the macro and micro universe. I remember seeing this Earth from a bird's eye view and then going into the very cells that govern my body. And I remember going through this metaphysical death where my physical body was literally disintegrating, at least from my perception at the time. And like I said, it was the most intense form of catharsis I've ever experienced in my life. Like I've never sobbed or even screamed like I did that night in my entire life. And I remember perceiving these very distinct shamanic entities there to help me, like heal and clear away all this negative energy I had within me. I think it's important to note though that extremely high doses of psilocybin may induce these experiences of primordial information downloads from the universe, but I think a lot of it is irrelevant to humans and this physical dimension. And what I mean by this is that you might get access to these cosmic Akashic records and all that and get all this alien information which is just impossible to decode and integrate in a practical way in human life. It would almost be like teaching calculus to a dog, so it's pretty fucking irrelevant. So yeah, a lot of what's going on during a heavy mushroom trip is not something that the human mind can logically understand. Most of it is happening on a energetic, emotional, primal level. Personally, this is why I think psilocybin usually takes a lot longer to integrate when you compare it to other earth-based medicines like ayahuasca and San Pedro. Like, it takes me months to fully put all the pieces of the puzzle together after a heavy mushroom dose. Whereas with San Pedro or ayahuasca, the next day I'm pretty set on all the insights that I learned. Whereas after mushrooms, I'm like, what did that mean? Like, what the fuck? And then a month would pass and I put these two pieces together. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what that meant. And then another few months would pass and be like, oh, no shit.